You're listening to Podcast PXN,
a video game podcast
delivering player experience news.
Let's go!
Genki, dial into PXN and listen to the Spoilercast. And welcome to Podcast PXN episode 208. Dan, please, 218. I am one of your... Hey, hold on. Does my mic sound okay? Am I back to normal levels or am I still quiet?
You sound good.
Yeah, you sound fine, I think. I didn't change anything from last week, so...
That
means I'm still quiet.
Yankee impression, just to be sure.
Right.
And I am one of your hosts, the independent video essayist from Portland, Oregon, Christian Macias. A little bit of a cold today, my apologies. And I'm joined over Discord by Kentucky's #1 Spartan and PXN founder, Daniel Prindle, aka Dan is DTM.
Someone save Genki.
Okay, but for real though, keep checking my audio levels to make sure I'm I'm okay or not okay. Please let me know. And also, the president of the Tifa Lockhart fan club. He is the Nintendo aficionado, artist extraordinaire, and currently over 100,000 viewer YouTubeist. Yeah, congratulations on over 100,000 views on a video. At Roro.
Hello, and thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love you.
Oh.
It took me that long to find the golf clap.
Nice.
Where were you?
I had to put his glasses down and...
And lastly, one half of the Men Engage podcast, Battlefield's bad boy, the Tarkov Teletubby himself, DMZ Daddy, Gage Dempster.
Thank you. Are you independent or are you indie?
Good callback to last week's discussion on the Game Awards. You're This is why you're incredible.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah. Dan, you taking notes?
What the fuck?
You're such an asshole.
Damn it, Ro.
Anyway.
You're encouraging him.
Ro was spot on with that, though. He didn't waste a second.
I just love the soundboard.
Some quick housekeeping here, because half of this podcast is American. Thanksgiving in America is happening tomorrow, and we're wishing all of our American audience. Dan, what are you doing? Oh, you're pointing to me.
Yeah.
That you have a lovely Thanksgiving weekend, whatever you do, whether it be staying inside and watching movies on your lonesome and chilling, or enduring family drama around the dinner table. And we thank you for tuning into PXN each and every week. Yeah, we love you. Grateful for you. Some more housekeeping is I found a part-time gig, and I am announcing my position next week. I think my official start... I signed a contract already. My initial start date is Monday, so I'm waiting until next week to make that official announcement, I think on Twitter. And I'll be, thank you. I'll be mentioning that on the pod next week. Cool stuff.
Hell yeah. Exciting. I love it.
Yeah.
It is in the games industry. I'll see. That's why I'm saying that here. Thank you to everyone watching us live and participating in the chat. Just as a reminder, we are live each and every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on youtube.com at Podcast PXN, as well as simultaneously on twitch.tv/Podcast PXN as well. The topic of the show this week is finally our Spider-Man 2 spoiler cast. No, we're not talking about Sam Raimi. We're talking about Insomniac's Marvel Spider-Man 2. We got to talk about naming schemes in the games industry. It's going to happen with another title here later in Street Meets, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, the show always starts with a quick bite, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Guys, I made a shorter show this week because I wanted a bulk of discussion to happen in News of the Week, as well as our actual tots. So we're going to run through just some very minor cool stories that happened this week. Starting with Eminem is coming to Fortnite in the Big Bang event starting December 2nd. The real Slim Shady just stood up on the show and he's clapping. Yeah. I think yesterday there was like a picture of like Eminem as a Fortnite skin and it looked very much fake. I'm like, there's no way. This is like, when Peter Griffin shows up, like, every couple of months. No, and Epic confirmed, yeah, Eminem is actually coming. So are we squatting up as Eminem?
I will not be spending money to play as Eminem, but I'm surprised it took this long.
Fair.
I'm surprised it took this long to add him. Like in terms of like the celebrities that they've added, he's kind of arguably one of the most influential rappers of all time.
I'm
Question mark.
surprised.
So
I'm surprised he's not in Call of Duty to fight Nicki Minaj. You know,
right,
I mean,
yeah.
Do you remember playing the Treyarch Zombie Map 5 and then hitting all the phones in the correct order so you could start listening to that Eminem song?
Right.
Yep.
That was awesome.
I miss zombies Easter eggs like that. You know what I mean? Little cool stuff like that, yeah. This one's pretty cool. Wonka and Xbox. Guys, Paul King, director of movies like Paddington 2 and also the forthcoming Wonka, and Timothy Chalamet have visited Kojima Productions. In that regard, Hideo Kojima was gifted an Xbox Series X that's Wonka themed, looks like a chocolate bar. And then, of course, Paul King signed one of Kojima's like prize Paddington stuffed figures that he has. And then presumably, as much as like everyone does when they go visit Kojima, they get scanned into Kojima Productions like library, whatever they do. So will Timothy Chalamet and Paul King end up in Death Stranding 2? I'll have to wait and see.
Very possible. I just love his jacket.
Timothy's or Paddington's?
I mean both, but I was talking about Timothy's. Yeah. I was talking about Timothy's.
That's fair.
Yeah. that blue jacket is nice though. I would rock that.
I got a lot of love for Hideo. Like every time someone comes, like you can always see him in the background, like just doing photo shoots of them. He's always so excited.
Right.
I thought Dan would say something about the Xbox. The chocolate theme one.
He's the real one. Yeah, I want to eat this. I don't know. What do you want me to say? Like, it's too much pressure.
Well, that was something. We'll take it. Our last quick buy is a correction from last week. We spent some time talking about Warner Brothers' Wonder Woman game that seemingly leaked that it was supposed to be a live service game, according to a previous developer that was on the game. WP has since come out and responded saying that no, it's actually not the case. The game is still scheduled to be a single-player game, which could be exciting. It's everything we wanted. It's what we discussed.
So the rumors came from somebody who worked on it, right? And was like, they did their part, they left, and then in their LinkedIn or something like that, it mentioned that that there's a live service. I wonder if this means that it's like, while not technically live service, if it's still going to be like a super heavily monetized game. You know what I mean?
Sure, like some kind of
like this person that worked on it confused it for a live service game.
I get you.
So I don't know. I'm not gonna. Warner Brothers is a little iffy right now, so I'm gonna wait till I see reviews before I get excited because I'm skeptical at best.
Here's the official statement: Wonder Woman is a single player action adventure game set in a dynamic open world. It's also confirmed that the game will use the patented Nemesis system from Middle Earth Games. So if there are any live service elements in this game, it could be something like gear-based system.
For sure. Because it's funny, like, I guess people would probably argue semantic-wise that they're not live service games, but like the newer Assassin's Creed games almost feel like it if you open up the store page with the amount of nonsense and like, oh, you want to not play the game? Don't worry, you can just buy things that skip it and add things to your map and do all this, and you want this gear set that totally disembowels the whole idea of doing RPG stuff. Here, get this gear set for $5. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm hoping that's not what's happening in Wonder Woman. But just because them saying it's a single-player, non-live service game doesn't mean it won't feel like a live service game where things are just shoved down your throat and options to buy things and all that crap.
I apologize to Dan, but talk about a game that came and went, eh? Assassin's Creed Origins? Like, did that have any lasting impression on, like, the spheres on Twitter? Like, that was a game...
You mean Mirage?
Sorry, thank you. Okay. Mirage, thank you. Like, a game that went back to Assassin's Creed roots, a game that, like, presumably everyone wanted out of Assassin's Creed. Kind of came and went.
I have a theory as for why though, and Dan and I talked about this. And yes, Dan enjoys the game a lot more than I did. I didn't finish it, but it's a step in the right direction. But what it is that like actually, Christian, you were talking about this. You mentioned that like going back and looking at like gameplay from Unity and how Unity just looks like the parkour, and that's because like I feel like it's. The engine in those games like was designed around parkour as one of, if not the main gameplay element. Whereas this one, they got rid of all the RPG stuff, but it's still like kind of using that same framework. So the parkour wasn't like, instead of it being that they remade the game to make it like those old games, it's not. It's still the RPG Assassin's Creed stuff. They just took out all the RPG things, so it doesn't feel. I don't know. I feel like that might be why it didn't hit for a lot of people, or it's not quite where it needs to be yet. But I noticed it where I was like, this parkour feels really like kind of the same as the other ones that where parkour wasn't as big of a thing. I don't know. I could just be rambling.
See, and personally, I think it's more so that this game is too much leaning into the first game. Like they're trying to do too much to imitate what the first game did instead of figuring out what the entire franchise did well over the course of 1 through Unity before they, well, I guess started changing things with Syndicate and all the other ones. Like it feels more like they took a too safe route, I feel like.
That's a really good point. It's almost like yeah, it's actually a really good point. It almost kind of feels like what was it, The Force Awakens, where it's like, oh, they're back on Tatooine and back like they went back to the same setting and kind of had the same vibes. It's totally right. Yeah.
Gage said I'm totally right. That never happens. Wow.
You're totally right this once. Don't get used to it.
I'm reading a review my friend left for Spider-Man 2.
Oh.
On backlog. I'm backlogged.
Maybe you can use that as a prompt later.
Yeah, are any of you three on backlogged? Should I be following you guys? I think Dan and Gage should be on this. Road plays like
what happened? Like, okay, all right, we need to have a talk. And this,
okay, I'll let you know that other app, GG, was never good. It was never good.
Come on, everybody loved it until everybody does it. This is the problem I have with all this Twitter bullshit.
I never liked it.
God, everyone and their grandmother loved GG until suddenly now there's a new one I gotta get.
It never worked. No, Backlog has been out before GG.
Is this true?
But it didn't have
I feel like the zeitgeist was all GG until suddenly
because
now it's
Backlog has no app. It has no app. It's all web-based.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really it's way superior.
All right.
I used Backlog for a little bit when I played games, like Christian was saying. But I like it, but I think the convenience of the app is why I use GG so much, unfortunately. I don't hate it by any means, though.
I think it's what's wrong with GG? I think it's a perfectly good app. Yeah.
All right, enough. Let's move on to Street Meets. We have 2 items, although one of them was going to be grouped into News of the Week, so I'll mention it now. We got a bit more speculative details on Naughty Dog's next project, and we'll be inserting this in discussion with News of the Week because we'll be talking about that. So we'll insert that there. Keep that in mind. However, our next Street Meet comes from Okami Games. Gage shared this in our Twitter DM. Okami Games writes, COD 2024 is reportedly called Call of Duty Black Ops Gulf War, which again, we gotta move away from like serializing names like this in the industry. It's getting a little bit tedious. Like, what is it? Star Wars Jedi Survivor is just clunky. Call of Duty Black Ops Gulf War also is a bit clunky, although less so. It makes sense though, considering the last one was Black Ops Cold War. Now this is Gulf War. Here are the details. New Black Ops game set during the Gulf War of the early 90s. Round-based zombies returns, and I'll just mention this in a second. I'll chill. Classic Black Ops maps like Grind and WMD will be featured in the game. And last is Activision is exploring a, quote, large pre-order bonus with several days or possibly several weeks early access for the base game and zombies, which is predatory. Do not do this.
I will do this.
Do not. Do not give support for these practices, man. Please. Do you remember when fucking Starfield did this and there was like spoiler cast for the game before the game was even publicly released? That shit pissed me off.
That was pretty.
How are we feeling? Dan, I think, is pretty excited for Gulf War, considering, as he said, this game has been in development for nearly 4 years.
Yes, I am cautiously excited, Christian.
Right.
Yes, cautiously.
Thank you.
I by no means am I saying everybody fucking let's flip tables. The game's gonna be the fucking game of the year next year. But no, I mean I'm very optimistic. I feel like Treyarch for a while now, in my opinion, has been the best Call of Duty developer. I mean, Infinity Ward had some turnover for a while there, and they were kind of in turmoil. And then I feel like they rerighted the ship with the original Modern Warfare reboot. But I still feel like Treyarch is like that studio for Call of Duty. And the fact that they're given 4 years, which no other Call of Duty game has ever had 4 years. The most we've ever had is 3 years. Like, that's not insignificant. And like you bring up Cold War, for instance, as we talked about in our chat. Cold War was made in 2 years. Like, that game, in my opinion, was a pretty good game for 2 years. I'm not saying that Cold War is one of my favorite games or anything like that, but I think it's impressive given it was fucking 2 years and we're doubling that amount of time for this game. On paper, this game should be a banger of a game. On paper.
Age.
Two things. One, the title is a problem. We're getting totally we're getting to the point where we have subtitles under subtitles because everything has to be a franchise, and if we want to create a new franchise, it has to exist within that franchise. It's too much. It's ridiculous. Black Ops, Gulf War. They're not putting another semicolon there, but this is a subtitled subtitle. This is ridiculous. And Cold War, I had an issue with that title as well. But yeah, for the most part, I kind of agree with everything with what Dan's saying, is that Treyarch has, for a while now, been the best, in my opinion, the best Call of Duty studio. And it's more of a personal bias because I'm somebody who thinks that the Zombies game mode, even though we've seen it year after year, I think is probably one of the best co-op experiences in gaming that's ever existed. It's lasted the test of time, and I'm somebody who probably has like over 100, maybe even 200 hours in Cold War, and I can guarantee you that like 90% of it actually has a little pie graph in that game if you go to your barracks and you look at your stats, and like almost 100% of that time was spent in Zombies. So yeah, and the fact that game, I'm excited because I want to see Zombies on the new engine, which we really have yet to see. Obviously, Modern Warfare has the new Modern Warfare 3 has a battle royale kind of bastardized version of Zombies in it, but Treyarch's last game, as Dan said, was because of the shift that they did, was made in 2 years, and they actually haven't got to release a game on the new engine yet. They had to quickly put that one together in the old engine, which is why I think is actually probably most of the criticism that game got is that it did feel dated at the time. So the fact that they're getting the new engine, they're going to have all this crazy graphical fidelity, and they're getting 4 years. It's funny, for the first time in Call of Duty's 30-year history, they're getting a game with like a regular amount of development time for like a video game to get, which is 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. My concerns is the erosion of like this series identity, as we talked about in the pre-show. I'm kind of like, this is the Gulf War setting. Like, they have a really good opportunity to kind of bring it back and dial it back. Like, if we can get to, this is the era of films like Black Hawk Down and Jarhead. If we can get that kind of tone, just a little bit of that tone back, and maybe like a bit of seriousness back, I think this could be a really good game. And like, personally, as somebody,
you don't want Groot skins.
I don't want Groot skins running around in Fallujah. No, I would prefer not to have that if that's possible. Yeah.
Nicki Minaj.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nicki Minaj. Yeah, no, I don't need any of that. No, thank you.
My thing is, on paper, this all sounds great. In fact, I even agree with both of you. My criticism is like only on the timing of the leak. Like, my first question is like, who is the leaker? Where's the leak coming from? And now Gulf War was like the rumor for a while. Like that was what speculation was. I don't know if there was like a previous leak before that. I think that was like maybe known. But seeing like the text come up, round-based zombies returns, is like, okay. Clearly, this has maybe something to do with the fact that Modern Warfare 3 Zombies just came out, and it is extremely poor received by the fans. This almost smells a little bit like, oh, come on, Dan, come on. I saw that like the little like maybe
me
head
pondering. Yeah, I mean,
most of what I've seen about this mode is like pretty negative stuff about it.
I mean, I'm negative.
Am I crazy?
No,
Okay.
I mean, I'm negative on it. That's what I told Gage. That's why I wasn't buying the game, because I was pretty negative on what I saw.
Oh, you didn't buy it? I thought you bought it.
No, God, no.
No, that was me. I'm the one that bought it. I missed him.
Yeah.
Were you about to say this sounds like damage control or smells a little bit like damage control?
It smells like it, like Modern Warfare 3 just came out, and it came out to like what the worst reviews and like
Yep.
the worst fan reception, and now immediately we're getting news. Let's look ahead to the next Call of Duty, guys. Like, dude, this is damage control again, and this just happened with the previous Modern Warfare.
And I'm
And
not
so I'm like, okay, go ahead.
I'm not disagreeing with you that could be the case, but like also at the same time, like how much does this like do for people hearing that round-based zombies returns? Because like I think
A lot.
well, but I think we already anticipated that, right? Like
True.
I think people already, marked that down that Treyarch's going to bring back round-based zombies, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of why they had this open world one for this year's game.
And the reverse is that even if it is to some degree damage control,
Right.
who cares? Because you're right. It is Treyarch working on this for the first time ever in the franchise, a 4-year development cycle, which is exciting for both
Right.
the narrative front and for the content of the game, which is the modes of the game. Which zombies is like the almost bread and butter of that franchise. At least half of it, I would say, at this
Right.
point.
I would say like as most things in the world, this is probably one of those cases where like both things are true. Where it's like this is probably somebody panicking and maybe doing a little bit of damage control and telling some blabbermouth about something so that it spreads, but at the same time totally unnecessary because like the COD machine keeps turning. Like people were already gonna buy it, so it doesn't really matter. But the timing, I definitely thought the same thing. The timing is definitely pretty interesting, and I feel like I don't know. It's interesting, but. As Dan said, cautiously optimistic, although I'm probably a bit less cautious.
Let's move on to news of the week. We've got one item here, and this is all on The Last of Us Part 2. We got a leak followed by a pretty quick confirmation, I think, that the following day, that The Last of Us Part 2 remake for PlayStation 5 is officially confirmed. That comes from the PlayStation blog. I gave full details there, link to the blog, although I broke it down entirely for you guys with these bullet points that we can go through together. First of all, yes, this is an actual port of the game, a native PS5 version, which did not exist beforehand. We're getting a native version of the game with PS5 enhancements, including graphical improvements, though this seems to be pretty subjective based on the recent screenshots we've seen, the comparison screenshots. It's kind of hard to tell what the differences are in those, but maybe, when you're actually playing the game and it's native 4K, that might have, you might feel that difference. Yes, also native 4K fidelity mode is coming. Also a 1440p performance mode. We get unlocked frame rate for VRR monitors and displays. Improved loading times, of course, since moving from PS4 to PS5 SSD, and then full DualSense integration. That's all coming. Here are some new features coming as well with the SKU. Lost levels. You can explore early developed versions of 3 new levels previously unreleased. You're also getting hours of new developer commentary you can listen to as you play the game, and those new lost levels to find out why they didn't make it to the final cut. There's also a guitar free play mode with new unlockable instruments for those that like making content of Joel or Ellie playing various songs. I used to enjoy those TikToks. There's a speedrun mode where you can I think there's leaderboards as well included on this. Descriptive audio and speech to vibrations has been added to accessibility features, which is always good. And then new character and weapon skins for Ellie and Abby are introduced. And finally, there's a new mode coming to the game called No Return. This is a roguelike survival mode, or this is a pull quote. Experience The Last of Us Part 2's deep combat via an entirely new mode. Survive as long as you can in each run as you choose your path through a series of randomized encounters. Play as a host of different unlockable characters, some never before playable in the Last of Us franchise, each with unique gameplay traits. The variety of challenges feature different foes and memorable locations from throughout Part 2, all culminating in tense boss battles. I think this is probably the biggest update to the game, and kind of one that's out of left field from a port of any kind of game from Naughty Dog. Finally, okay, for those who are interested in buying the game, The Last of Us Part 2 has a WLF edition for PS5. This includes a steelbook case with the game. You actually get the disc in that, which we don't see. I know, right? featuring additional digital content for the PS5 console. You get 47 Society of Champions trading cards and holographic cards. You get a WLF patch and 4 enamel pins. And lastly, most importantly, I would say, is that yes, the game does come with an upgrade path. PS4 owners of the game, of The Last of Us Part 2, whether it is physical or digital, can upgrade to the remaster for only $10. We thank the Lords that Jim Ryan for once did the right thing and not charge $70. Of course, if it were a remake, which would not make sense, yes, it probably would be $70 but for a remaster, for a PS5 SKU of this game, $10 upgrade path, I think, is more than sufficient. All right, I've talked more than enough. Thoughts on the game? I know we've also talked a little bit on Twitter about like the backlash this has been seeming to get with how many SKUs of The Last of Us we've gotten over the couple of years. I personally, I think, am okay with a remaster of this game. In fact, I've been kind of wanting one for a while.
Yeah.
I think it's fair. I don't think it's unfair to make a PS5 version of the game. I think, could they have done it better, in my opinion, by supporting PS5 through the original game for a free update and allow people to enjoy that game at a better frame rate, better resolution without touching anything else? I think that would have been nice to have in addition to this, but I don't think it's terrible for $10 for this upgrade path for all of the other stuff you're getting along with the graphical updates, like what you're saying, the brand new mode with no return. That sounds interesting. That's kind of sounds like to me like Resident Evil always has like those survival type modes. It kind of feels a little bit like that, which is kind of cool.
Mercenaries.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I definitely don't. I don't think $10 is unreasonable, for sure.
It's one of those things where it's like this is it's a good move for Sony, but like as Dan and I talked about in the PXN chat, is that if it was another company, this might have been a free update, right? So pretty good for Sony to do this because it's kind of they're known to not really do things that are this pro-consumer, but it definitely could have been a free update, I think. But $10.
Well, I would have been with you for a free update if it was just the PS5 enhancements, like the graphics or like native 4K modes.
Right.
I mean, you could play the PS4 version of the game and get some of those. It wouldn't be native 4K, but it was like upscaled 4K.
Right.
But like, yeah, with the news that new hires on Naughty Dog were using this to like onboard to then move into their future project by working on lost levels and the new mode, I think makes sense to like package it as like a full thing.
Yeah. I actually that piece of information kind of changed my perspective on it a little bit. It kind of gave me some context because I hadn't really thought about that before when some companies do this, but I think that not only does it totally track, but like it's pretty smart to do that. If you want, especially if you're scaling up your team for whatever their next project is, this is totally a great way to get people on board and working with these kinds of assets, because you have no idea where these new hires are coming from, what level of experience they have, but I can only imagine working with the character models or the object models or the texture packs of a Naughty Dog game is totally unlike most experience that these people have working with, right? Like, oh yeah, I brought my laptop from my old job, and then it's like, okay, just download these assets, and the thing starts fucking lifting off from the table. Yeah, but I think it's fair to point out, as I try to say, is that not everybody is as in the industry and as dialed in as we are.
Yeah.
So from an optics standpoint, that Naughty Dog has released so many remasters, I understand the frustration. I don't agree with the criticism because some people don't know what they're talking about, and that's fine because not everyone can know everything. But in optics, looking at it, it's like, oh, what's Naughty Dog's new game coming out? Oh, it's Last of Us Remastered. Part 1? No, Part 2 this time. Oh, okay, cool. Part 2 remastered this time. So, like, I kind of get that. For me, the roguelite mode, sign me the fuck up. That sounds amazing. The early development levels with commentary, like, that's really cool. I'm going to watch that. I love watching behind the scenes of things that I love. In video games, you normally don't get that a lot. Very cool. I like that. And because I already own the game for $10, so like for me personally, this all lines up to be a really good deal. I could understand how some other people might not feel that way though.
The one thing I'll push back on is that this is only the second remaster. I'm pretty sure the last one was 2013 2014 when they did a 1-year anniversary of The Last of Us part the original with the DLC included for PS4.
Because The Last of Us Part 1 is technically a remake,
The
even though
remake.
it kind of skirts
That's the
that
annoying
line.
one. That if that did not exist, I don't think this would be as annoying. In an
No,
ideal
for sure.
in an ideal world, the remake comes with Part 2, the version PS5 version, together as one single SKU for $70. That to me is like the most pro-consumer move we could be doing. The
Or
fact
even-
that you now have two SKU, $140 to experience The Last of Us is a little bit obtuse or a bit
sure.
arbitrary. Yeah, that's a bit too much.
I think that's one way they could have gotten they could have changed the optics. I think another way is that if The Last of Us Part 1 was a more easily identifiable remake in terms of what we were all speculating before it launched, where it's like, is it made in Last of Us Part 2's engine where Joel can dodge and weave and do all the like if that game came out and it looked more clearly like a remake, I wouldn't in my head consider it a remaster. But I didn't do that for a bit just now. I literally added that to the list of remasters because it does kind of feel it skirts that line. Like, yeah, it's a remake and yeah, the graphical fidelity is crazy, but like they didn't add new mechanics, they didn't do anything. So it's kind of like
And also,
Absolutely.
and also to be fair, it's like, I mean, why is this coming out? It's because The Last of Us HBO is doing incredible. They have Last of Us Part 2 that
I disagree.
Okay.
Well, finish your point though. Finish your point.
My point is Sony's trying to sell the Last of Us brand at this time, so putting out a new version is going to probably sell copies to people who didn't play on PlayStation 4, for instance, for Part 2.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I think, in my opinion, the best path would have been to do graphical, not graphical, but 4K resolution, native 4K, 60 frames per second, update the PS4 version to work on PS5. And then if you want to add this other stuff as like DLC or something, I just personally, I don't see that, because that game already looked incredible on PS4. Like, I don't see how much more they're going to be able to do to like justify the remaster, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm with you. This should have came out like 2 years ago, and it should have been $10 for like, the additional stuff, but you can also upgrade for free. By the way, when I said I disagree, I meant like that. I think you're right. That's the reason why they're doing it, but I don't think it's the only reason.
Right.
I think there's a history of them putting like the swan song, like weird games that like come at the end of a console's life cycle as remasters on their new console. I think that makes sense. They did the same thing for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And the upgrade path there was like a Peter that no one liked his face in, but still they've done this before, and like it makes sense that they did it again. But it does feel annoying when you have that remake that just came out. Like we just saw The Last of Us like a year ago.
Right.
And to Dan's point, I feel like that might be another reason why people have become upset with this, where they feel like The Last of Us is becoming milked to an extent with the show, with the remakes, with the stuff. And for a game that people were fine with just having Part 1, we have all these SKUs and sequels coming out and stuff like that. So I can understand why people feel that way about a franchise that they love so much kind of becoming a franchise that is too much of a franchise, I guess, for lack of a better sentence. But yeah.
Absolutely. Circling back to the Street Meet from earlier, Naughty Dog's next game is in full focus, and has not been affected by The Last of Us 2 Remastered. There was a team working on this new game all the while. However, some of the people from The Last of Us 2 Remastered were used as like kind of onboarding, get used to the workflow of working at Naughty Dog, and then they can then transition into working with the full team working on the new IP. According to the VGC podcast host Jordan Midler, The Last of Us 2 Remastered was a project for new hires. The new narrative is full steam ahead. From what I was told, this is a quote from one person, this was more of a project for new hires to get them in the game. Druckmann's team is full steam ahead on an original. One doesn't take away from the other, as far as I know. This is the biggest piece of news, considering we thought Neil Druckmann was working on writing The Last of Us Part 3, considering that he mentioned that if there might be a story to tell there, or that he was put that on pause to then also work on The Last of Us Season 2 HBO with Craig Mazin. Did not expect for Druckmann to be working on the presumably sci-fi IP from that team. So as we've known before, there are multiple teams at Naughty Dog working on various projects. Rumors point to their next game being the new IP, potentially sci-fi or fantasy, and The Last of Us Part 3 as the title after that.
What was the direct quote that this guy said? Sorry, can I get that quote again? I'm trying to decipher this. Neil
Dan, read it.
Druckmann team is working on an original.
Was it?
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
The direct quote, Gage?
Yeah.
From what I was told from one person, this was more of a project for new hires to get them in the game. Druckmann's team is full steam ahead on an original. One doesn't take away from the other. AFIK. I don't know.
As far as I know.
Oh, as far as I know.
On an original. That's such a weird wording. My gut tells me their next game is Last of Us Part 3. I'm still gonna say it. I'm sorry. That's what my gut says.
On an
Wow,
original.
can't wait for you to be wrong.
Yeah, I was gonna say original. I'm assuming he's meaning original IP, right?
You would assume that, but on an original, that's such a weird.
Why are you saying it that way? Why are you saying it weirder than it is?
It is weirder than it. It is weirder than it is.
Because it's not original if it's The Last of Us Part 3. That's,
On an original. Maybe okay. I could see that maybe my brain's short circuiting, but that sounds like a weird. Why would you not just say what he's? I don't know.
It does bring an interesting question though, because they're gonna run out of content on the HBO series at some point, because there's no way.
No, that takes years, man. That takes years.
Yeah, but this game, the Untitled game.
Yeah, so do games. Games take years too.
Yeah, the Untitled game's not going to be out for probably at least a year or two, and then The Last of Us wouldn't even be started yet. Part 3.
I think because I think we could be getting season 2 of the show as early as January 2025. I think it's totally possible because right now they've just said they've just given a yearly release window of 2025. But
yeah,
if they want to keep,
there's also another strike coming.
Possibly.
Possibly, you're right.
We'll see. It's gonna be Last of Us Part 3. I will be right, and you will see.
Okay.
And you will be happy.
No fantasy draft check-in this week. Will return, I think, a week or maybe 2 when Avatar comes out eventually. We'll find out. However, until then, Dan, what you got for me?
Who I have for you? Well, right before the podcast, Glenn's like, "Hey, come play Forza Motorsport with me." I'm like, "Glenn, I don't have time." He's like, "Oh, just real quick. It'll be real quick." I was like, "Fine, do a short, quick race. I've got time for one race." So he did a 2-lap racer, and fucking what happens, guys? What happens? Well, we start the race, and Dan hasn't played Forza since it came out, and Dan's like, "What button do I fucking push to get out of the cockpit view? Because I fucking use the outside view." And
is it Y or is it the select button?
It's always those two, isn't it?
It's left bumper actually, which is just a little goofy. Yeah. And yes, so I'm fumbling around trying to figure that out, and I'm not looking at the screen. I'm looking at my controller, and I drive right into a wall, and Glenn's like, "I'm going to win." I'm like, "Glenn, come on, come back here." So we end up lining up next to each other while the race is still going on. So then we take back off. This man fucking 20 feet down the road, and I am no fucking, spring driver when it comes to these games, but fucking Glenn drives me straight into a fucking wall, like hard. Like literally he's playing fucking Demolition Derby or some shit. I'm like, "Glenn, that's not how you play this fucking game. What are you doing, you fucking mad lad?" So
kill this show.
Yeah. Well, he gets far ahead of me. I'm not kidding, because if he pushed me in the wall, it spins me around. I'm facing the wrong direction. I got to back up, turn around, all that. I fucking still came back and smoked his ass after the second lap and fucking beat him. Get wrecked, Glenn. You wanted it. You fucking got it. Boom.
Damn!
So there you go.
Wow. Got him.
There he is. You and Glenn just can't play a cooperative game, can you?
No.
Every time with you
No.
two, it's one of you challenging to the other. And if I join the party when this is happening, it's nothing but screaming and shouting. And you two are just incapable of getting along. It's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it's fun though. It's fun though. I also played a couple of matches of Fortnite OG because I was just curious, and I played the correct mode, build mode, how God intended it, how Donald Mustard intended it.
God, it's
And guess what, guys? I got a win. I fucking screenshotted that shit. I was like, look at that. It's still fucking easy as shit because there's no skill-based matchmaking. Boom.
They put Dan in the bot lobbies.
They might have. If you haven't played it in a while, I think they did that to me with my first match back. I was like,
Yeah.
these people aren't fighting back at all.
Yeah.
What is going on here?
Wrecked shit.
Roshan?
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume no, and I realized this week why you don't play any games.
Why is
It's because
that?
you're so busy with school and video essays. Like no shit, he doesn't have time for video games.
My downtime I use for watching anime now, which I guess I
Yeah.
would usually do if I would also playing video games, but more of it is spent for. That's true. I am rather going to trade in my copy of Superstars for Mario RPG on Friday, so hopefully I'll get a chance to play it. But yeah.
Nice. Who wrote this? Who's changing this in there? I just got back from a trip to New York. I ran a half marathon in Boston. I've been away from games for a long time, but I got back and I was like, you know what? I got my copy of Mario Wonder waiting for me. I might go visit my parents in December. I'm gonna save that for then. So I did not play Mario Wonder. If I'm gonna play, I'm gonna play it on the Switch to go. But what is going on?
It's for my what you got for me. You just keep doing your thing. Don't worry about
All right. So instead, I started up Alan Wake 2, and I will reiterate what my friend Hugo said. I wish more AAA developers had the balls to develop games like with this strong of an art direction. To just get weird with it and have an actual like take and like let us enjoy a different kind of ambiance and art style for a while, and let's not all try to do the same thing over and over again. And I'm still early enough that I don't have anything to say, like much like Dan last week.
Can I ask
Go
you
ahead.
something? What
Mhm.
what are your thoughts of the not the Mind Palace? What do they call it in this game? Crap. She calls it something else, but it's basically a Mind Palace. Like what
Should
are
I
your
call it the Mind Palace? That sounds right.
She says this is my Mind Palace, but she calls it something else. I forget. Yeah, it's
Also, like a meditation thing, or
yeah. So like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, that's
it's
I've only played an hour or two, but like every time they're like, "Hey, go to your Mind Palace." The only thing that gets slightly annoying is having to put every single piece of evidence on the board that you've collected. That
I love that.
You love that?
I think
Okay.
I think meeting the game on its terms of like, hey, it wants you to simulate playing a
Right.
saga. They really want you to simulate being an FBI agent and piecing together like evidence in that way. Is it a little bit tedious to have to like
Yeah.
look through case files and I guess like pick where to do it on the board? Maybe, but like to me, like that is the fun of the Mind Palace for me. Is like, yes, I've figured out, I've solved everything in this case board. I've deduced everything. Now I have pictures left from another piece of evidence. I had to go back to my case boards, open the new one up and place it. That is fun for me. It's also really cool to like instantly be in the real world and then go to the Mind Palace like just like this in an instant, and then realize that like time is still moving in real time in the actual real world. That stuff to me is cool.
The Mind
To me,
Place.
I like it. Thank you. Mind
That's what
Place.
she calls it. Yeah.
Good.
I like it.
Christian is a big fan of being a federal agent of the state, so I think it's pretty clear.
That's so untrue. Normally, I'm a cab except for this one. Except for this one thing.
Except for this one, yeah. Except for this one cop, right?
Except for this and True Detective season 1
and
No,
Fargo season 2.
You know, I never finished the Fargo TV series. I love the movie.
Did you get to
I was
season
enjoying.
2?
I was enjoying the TV show, and then I just stopped.
What season did you stop at, though?
Back to video games.
Okay. You stopped at season 1. Just say it.
I understand why the comparison was made that Alan Wake 2 is a lot like True Detective season 1. I think 2 hours in, I already feel those inspirations, and I'm really enjoying it, man. I can't wait to get Dan's full thoughts as he progresses through the game as well. Gage,
What you got for me? Well, have I got a story for you?
Uh-oh.
No, I have been playing a whole lot. Except for that, I continue to play because Modern Warfare Zombies is so disappointing. I continue to play Modern Warfare 2's DMZ mode, and what you'll find in the PXN After Dark chat is a clip that was recorded by Daniel because he was spectating because I was carrying the team as per the usual.
nice.
And what you'll find is the adrenaline you get
Bullshit.
when the match has expired its time limit, the zone is closing in, and that is the final chopper about to leave. And I smoke the people that were sitting there camping the extract. And I take their shit, and I just get on out of there. I fucking love this mode so much. I love extraction shooters. I cannot wait for the... Like, I know everybody else is going to get annoyed with it, just the same as happened with Battle Royales, and I feel for those people. But this is like my Battle Royale. I can't wait for more games to jump on the extraction shooter bandwagon. I absolutely love this game mode. It's so much fun. It feels so good when you pull off plays like this. And I've been playing DMZ. I'm about to go on a little shopping spree here, I think, soon. And I'm looking for more games to play. So not a whole lot of variety to report yet, but hopefully next week and the week after, I'll have a bunch of fun stuff that I've tried.
Lethal Company.
That will be one of them. As long as you're there to do
This
it.
weekend?
This weekend.
I bet.
Do it.
Should we get
Anyways,
into our... Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
I was gonna
you-
say carrying Dan as per the usual in most games. But
That's
anyways,
such
I saw.
bullshit.
Yeah,
No.
he's dead.
You want to know the context behind this? We fucking waited until the last second to get to an extraction chopper to the point where we were trying to outrun a fucking cloud of radiation. So I say, hey guys, this one looks pretty good. And I ping a fucking extraction that's not in the fucking radiation zone. And Gage is like, yeah, bet, let's do it. And then fucking about 30 seconds later, I'm almost to the point, and Gage is like, oh, fuck, I'm going to the wrong one. Fuck, what
That
the
sounds
fuck?
right.
So I get to the point, and I get fucking just absolutely lasered by a team of people, and Gage is fucking lollygagging in the middle of the fucking radioactive storm. So
and then what did Gabe do when he came across those people?
you
well, we
killed
have the
one,
video.
you killed the
Right.
one guy that was left.
Yeah.
No, I killed the two guys.
Was there
There's
two guys?
There was two guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Dan.
Yeah.
You may have gone to the one by yourself, but you're still in the wrong. I got you, Gage. Don't worry.
Thank
I
you. I
got you.
appreciate it. You're handsome and
You're,
funny.
you're DMZ daddy.
I am. Papa will show you.
Maybe Dan should have noticed where he was away from his team.
I should have
True.
noticed. I
Very
fucking pinged it. I even pinged it on the map. I
Yep.
was playing a good teammate. I pinged the fucking point.
I love that you fall for the bait every time.
I do. You're
You
right.
turn into Jerry Seinfeld too when you do it, which is great.
Oh!
Yeah. Good.
Fuck.
Let's move on to the topic of the show.
God.
We waited long enough. We've discussed this maybe at 2 points in the past couple of months. We're finally going to get into the Spider-Man 2 spoiler cast. Now, I'm hesitant to even start right now. Ro, did you watch the entirety of the game via your friend? So you know all the narrative beats?
I do. I'm literally going to be able to talk about the story and only that when I'm
Okay.
doing this. But
And that's good enough. We've talked about gameplay enough. You know?
Okay. Yeah, so I know
Okay.
everything that happens, yeah.
Okay. Cool. How about most of the side content? You familiar with some of that stuff?
I'm familiar with some of the stuff. The two major emotional ones and some of the more controversial ones as well.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, I get. Okay, I know the two emotional ones. I know the. Okay, cool. Okay, so then we're able to discuss all together. Perfect. I don't have to kick out Ro. So let's get into the Spider-Man 2 spoiler cast. I went in and wrote down some notes. A lot of it is like notes on some of the major stuff that happens in the game, some of the stuff that we haven't been able to mention in the actual show at all yet. We've already talked about gameplay. We know that we like the gameplay of this one a lot. Gage, I think, has some minor criticisms. He had a skill issue. Never clicked
It was
for
a
him.
skill issue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But for the most part, I think we all agree, aside barring Ro as well, that the gameplay is the best it's ever been. Swinging wise is fantastic. But what we haven't discussed yet is the actual narrative, whether or not that hit and what specific moments did or did not work for us. For some, moments did hit, like Dan mentioned in our privately over Twitter. For some, it didn't at all. Let's get into it. The first note I have is a note on writing, just more general. You can use examples all you want. So spoilers ahead. Insomniac positioned Spider-Man 2 as the darkest, way darker than the original game. It's going to be a lot darker of an actual video game. Did this actually pan out for you during Spider-Man? Did you feel that this game was darker? For me, this is a flat out no. I want to see if anyone else has anything else to add before we dive deeper into that.
If we're talking in terms of darker than the original, that's a very low bar to hit, I think, because I don't think that the first one was very dark at all, personally. From what I'm remembering, anyways. My memory's terrible, so maybe I'm fucking just forgetting everything. But I mean, darker than that game, yes, but not dark in terms of video games that are dark, like fucking Last of Us, where you're fucking just absolutely surviving and getting beaten to death. It's definitely not that dark. It's definitely a very sunshiny darkness, which just sounds stupid, but it's Insomniac. I think anyone who can be described an Insomniac game could not see something being dark, because they haven't. Fair. I don't think they've ever done anything that dark. Even Resistance, I guess maybe is their darkest franchise, and even that, I'm not sure. I don't have much experience with Resistance. I'm just going based off of looks. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. I like that you brought up Spider-Man 1, because I think you could argue the dramatic moments from the climax of Spider-Man 1 might be a bit darker than a bulk of the game of Spider-Man 2. And let me go ahead, Gage.
Well, I just want to jump in and boost you here a little bit. Is that I would argue even the big midpoint thing in the first Spider-Man game with Miles Morales and what happens at City Hall, that to me that felt darker than a lot of the things that happened in Spider-Man 2 on top of what you're talking about at the very end of the game. But please continue.
Yeah, okay. So the moment that Gage is mentioning, of course, we haven't played Spider-Man 1, spoilers for that one as well, is Miles' father being killed by Mr. Negative, or Lee. And then, of course, the thing that I'm talking about is the death of Aunt May and Peter having to make that sacrifice. I think in terms of dark for Spider-Man 2, I think the moment they're referring to is Venom killing Kraven.
Yeah.
Or Kraven killing Scorpion and some of the other villains. That I think is the bulk of the darkness. I actually think this is way more lighthearted. The theme of this game that I wrote it down is it has to do a lot with anger, but more specifically forgiveness after that anger. How do you move past anger? Very similar to Last of Us Part 2 in that regard. But if you notice, everywhere in this game we're being reminded of that theme. A bulk of the villains from Spider-Man 1 and some of the other ones from previous Spider-Man canon are now reformed citizens. Spoilers. No. Tombstone.
Tombstone.
That's something else.
Yeah.
Tombstone is one. Mysterio is another. I think there might be another. There might be a third one.
Well, Martin Lee. With his arc.
With his arc, it feels like a lot of it is almost kind of happy isn't the right word, but it ends up being a bit more lighthearted. Right. So that I feel that throughout the bulk of the game, And the dark moments are just like one little scene that I find a little bit controversial. It doesn't make it an overall dark game for me. Maybe the post-credit scene lead a little bit to that, but I'm not convinced.
Right. I think the problem with this, well, one of the problems I have with the narrative in this game is that, I don't know, I remember, and like, I don't want to spend too much time on it because people that make a big fuss out of things, I don't think it's worth to give them a platform, right? Like, I mean, you look at like the Starfield and the gender pronouns guy or whatever. It's like, whatever, it's a fucking idiot. Let him scream into the void. But like with Spider-Man 1, I remember there being like quite a tizzy and like a few articles written about Spider-Man referring to himself as Spider Cop and how that was unacceptable, and you're avoiding the topics of blah blah. And it's like, I don't think people, I don't know, because this game, the writing in this game makes it seem like without the supervillains, that New York would be this crazy utopia where everybody's happy, cheery, fun time. It's just the supervillains that are causing this. With the way that all these characters are written and how the community just needs to pull together and do it's like, I don't know, it feels like
out.
Oh my god, I turned that shit off right away. But anyways, it's not leaning into the nuance that like it seemed like they got criticism, and I again, you can argue whether it was right or wrong to get the criticism in the first place, but it seems like there's less nuance and there's less sort of shades of gray in this. It's almost kind of like, and the shades of gray that are there, like you said, it's very kind of like hammered and on the nose, and like letting you that I'll just tell you I'm a reformed citizen. It's oh, okay, perfect. Well, now I know that you're reformed. Great. I will say, like, I think the Martin Lee. It's funny that you say that the theme of this is forgiveness and all that stuff, because Martin Lee is like kind of the best, in my opinion, the best written kind of. Mm-hmm. Whenever he shows up on screen, you're usually in for like some of the more nuanced and like really complex writing and really good emotional beats too between him and Miles that I thought were that took me by surprise, because everything else in the game was like kind of taking me out of it. So while I do shout that out, I feel like, to your point, that like it seems like that theme hit a lot more for some of these villains, and you only saw them for a little bit here and there, than it did for the actual main characters that the game is about, if that makes sense.
Dude, I'm so happy you brought that up, because it's obvious to me why they did this. Like, Peter and Miles are undergoing a very similar arc. One that is like dealing with like a hatred that's inside of them. Right? Miles with the hatred for Martin Lee, Peter with his hatred that is like building up through the symbiote. Like, we find out later, it's like it's an internal hatred that he doesn't forgive himself for various things, right?
Right.
And you're so right, dude. Like, the transformation that Miles goes through that theme, you don't even need the symbiote for it. It's much more nuanced. The one that Peter goes is just feels like,
right.
I feel wrong. It's not lazily written, but it feels oh, go ahead, Dan.
No, keep going.
I'm pretty much done. It feels like it needed another round of drafting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Just circling back to the darkness thing real quick, because this just popped into my head. The darkest moment for me, and maybe for you guys as well, was the moment where Venom rips off Kraven's head and eats it, basically, or eats his head, whatever happens off screen. But like, the problem is, I think the biggest problem I have with that is, after that moment, like, you would expect the game to be extremely dark. Like, the world around you is not changing. So when you're going on a mission as Spider-Man, you're going over to, a side mission or whatever that's available to you on the open world. That side mission isn't really changing based on what just happened. Like, is Peter going to be fucking swinging around like, man, this is awesome? Like,
right.
Someone's head just got fucking bit off. Like, and that's a problem, I guess, inherently with it being an open world game, because how do you do that as a developer? Change so many things in the world based on things that are happening in the narrative. Like, yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a really good point. If I'm picturing in my head a graph, right, where you can have like these sort of rolling hills or valleys, and like with that moment, it felt like a spike up in darkness, and then it just went right back down with what you're saying, right? And I think that's part of the problem, is that there is no consistency in tone. And part of that is because of the fact that it is an open world game. But I think a part of that is like, I feel your hesitation in saying like lazy writing. I think there is lazy writing in this game, not that the game as a whole is like, I'm not trying to say that people are lazy or not do their job, but I think there are moments we talked about off camera last time, and I'll get into that later when we get to that, but there are certain moments where it's like, it felt like a certain beat had to happen because it needed to happen, as opposed to they found a way to organically have these characters arrive at that situation. So I'll give a different example, and I'll save the other one I have for later because it's a big cliche that other superhero movies do and all that stuff. But one of the moments, one of the main themes in this game is driving a wedge between Peter and Miles. And I don't believe... I haven't spent as much time with this version of Miles. I didn't play Miles Morales. I got a couple hours in. But with the time I spent with Peter Parker, and the amount of character work he did in the first game, and like I've said before, that's Insomniac Spider-Man 2018 is my favorite Spider-Man story. I love it. I'm super emotionally attached to that. So I spent a lot of time with this Peter. I don't believe for a second that this Peter is as ignorant as they make him out to be in this game, where there'll be conversations where Miles calls him and it'll be like, "Hey Peter, like I'm really struggling, I need your help." And he's like, "Don't worry, Miles, with my help, you'll be the Spider-Man that this city needs you." And Miles is like, "Okay, well how can I?" And then Peter will be like, "Oh, sorry, Harry's calling, shut the fuck up. Sorry, Harry's calling, bye." And he hangs up the phone. And it's like, there's moments like this that happen that are so on the nose and so forced. Like I think back to grade school, where it's like you have the one friend where it's like your buddies, and then somebody else comes up and he's like, "Okay, fuck, see you later, bye." It's like, this is a 28-year-old adult that like has apparently a lot of emotional depth, and he's just incapable of seeing that he is blowing this guy off at every possible opportunity. Aside from the fact that they're superheroes and their level of responsibility is way greater, right? Even if they were just friends, I don't buy it. And there's a lot of little things like that in this game where it feels like we need these two people to have this reaction, so let's just write it that it happens, as opposed to finding a way, like you said, another round of drafts, to have these characters arrive at these places naturally.
For me, I guess if we're by the way, I should mention, I enjoyed the game. I like the game even. I just have major criticisms with it.
Right.
It feels like I'm just kind of harping to harp, but I swear it comes from a good place, because I want to see these games improve. Because I will no doubt play the next one. To me, when I think of like the lazy writing, I think one is happens very early on, which is like, if you want to bring in that criticism about the Spider Cop one from 2018, the way they kind of address it in this one is largely to ignore it, just don't say anything at all. But there is like a nod to it for a second when Peter Genki sets up a drone for Peter, and he's like, "Is this a drone? Genki, we don't spy on people." It's like, it's very much on the nose, like having to like separating like state surveillance and like this whole cop world that it was established in 2018 to now be like the complete opposite. That to me is like very much like, okay, we addressed it in this one simple line, let's move away from it. That to me felt a little bit lazy. But to me, the place I think suffers the most is Miles, actually. There's a lot of setup on his story in the early half, where he's like having to balance Spider-Man life and his Miles life by writing a college essay for admissions, and then also trying to set up meetings with like an academic advisor at like Brooklyn Visions, and also balancing his personal life with Haley and Genki, specifically Haley. And like that's the first couple of hours is like all about this with Miles, and then that's completely dropped through like the bulk of the game. It just shifts entirely over to Peter for the longest time, until the very climax of the game, when all the bows are like coming together. Like, oh, we got to wrap up the essay thing and the Haley thing for Miles like in one cutscene, or like two of them max, just right at the very end. Like, oh, I almost forgot. Yeah, there's a wedge between Miles and Haley that wasn't addressed for hours up until the very end. Like, okay, there's a conflict here we have to resolve. And that to me is like, okay, well, like we're doing a bit too much.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, I think the solution is that they did too much. Maybe they should have done less. But if they did everything that they did do in this game, it would have to be a longer game to make all of that work. And maybe Peter's stuff would get pushed to the wayside in favor of Miles' stuff. So they're in a tough place to balance all of this stuff for sure. But I mean, in an ideal situation, they would just make it a little bit longer, maybe write it a bit better. But I can see why some stuff got kind of pushed until later, unfortunately, or like just for pushing certain other stories for, I guess, that they thought were more important.
It's actually funny that you say that you think it would need to be a longer game for that row, because Guy in the YouTube chat says, I think Spider-Man 2 story was too short for its own good, but Miles carried himself in terms of writing and the whole thing, how he doesn't forgive Martin, but then Martin forgives himself and turns himself in. So that's very well said, kind of on the back of what you were saying, Ro.
Yeah. I really like that about... sorry, go ahead. We'll get to that later. It's fine. We'll get to it later. It's probably one of the bullet points. Yeah.
And I do agree with Guy. I think there's more moments that I think suffer because of like I mean, the length isn't short by any means, but I think for the kind of game they're wanting to write, it does need more time to like fully develop some stuff. We've talked about it before on previous shows. Craven gets very little character development throughout the experience. Sure. But also I think the third act of Harry ultimately becoming Venom, once that gets going, is kind of over before we even start. And it like snowballs into kind of an end of the world MCU level like disaster before like I think Dan made the point last episode or 2 episodes ago, like, okay, they made a note in the first game, like, the Avengers are gone on the West Coast or whatever, dealing with other stuff. Like, should they not come back for this kind of event where the entirety of New York is under like control of the symbiote? Like,
somebody, like, if not them, like, if they're setting up
yeah.
some sort of universe, right? Should somebody?
Just one of them, at least.
Anyone.
Yeah. Any, or at least a
could come
mention
back.
of
Anyone could show up and help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
the Avengers can't help. They're in space fighting Thanos.
Right.
They were blipped.
I think I want to touch on something too. Something that Christian said, where it's like it feels like you're harping on a game. Games are inherently unique in that gameplay is such a big part of it that I think it's okay to criticize one aspect, especially if the other aspect is so solid. Because, like Christian said, the whole idea of criticism is to improve whatever you're criticizing for the next one. And I think a great way to put this is, like, I consider The Last of Us Part 2 to be a masterpiece video game. I don't consider it to be a masterpiece narratively. It's very good narratively, but it's the game as a whole. It's all these different things. So, like, when it comes to Spider-Man 2, like, almost all of my issues come with narrative. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But it doesn't mean that I think the game is bad, because a game is so many different things, right, to make up this one product. So I just want to put that out there, because it's a good point to make it out that I'm not necessarily trying to harp on anyone or like go after a certain set of people. It's like, no, of this beautiful thing that you've created with all these moving parts, I have an issue with this one mechanism, so I'm going to talk about just that one thing. And I think with what Rose said earlier about like the writing could be better, it's like I don't want people to think that my takeaway is just get good at writing. It's one of those things where it's like you need to, if the scope of your story is XYZ, you need to accommodate it correctly by either having a longer length or, like Christian alluded to earlier, having multiple passes and multiple drafts. Like famously, I know Christian and Ro don't watch this, but Dan will get it. Game of Thrones Season 8 could have benefited from literally anyone else taking another look at that script before they fired that off. Have somebody else come in and just take a look. This is what you have? Okay. Because all it takes is a fresh set of eyes to maybe put together a few dots and like, okay, XYZ, maybe we can have this happen. Because there's a lot of concepts in Spider-Man 2 that I really like, but it's just the execution and how they got there. So the thing I was alluding to earlier that I'll mention, that like a lot of superhero stuff do this. It's not unique to Spider-Man. I just hate that it keeps happening because it's a very lazy cliche. Is that Norman Osborn has, I can't remember, but at some point earlier in the game, he has a positive experience with Spider-Man in the suit. He doesn't know the identity of who Spider-Man is, I believe, in this game. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Right. He has a positive experience with Spider-Man. I think it's maybe saving the lab from exploding or something happens. And it seems like New York as a general has a positive look of Spider-Man. But anyways, Cut to the end of the game. Norman Osborn sees Spider-Man carrying his son out of a burning building, and somehow in his brain, 10 out of 10 from the judges, mental gymnastics level, goes, "You did this somehow. You must have brought my son into that building, beat the shit out of him, and then brought him back out to me. This is your fault." And then that's the hook for the game. So when Dan was talking about how he likes the setup for the next game and where they're going, I agree with you. I like that they're setting up this villain to be the big bad. But how they got there is so fucking lazy. And I hate this cliche that happens. I hate this superhero. You see the superhero carrying somebody you love, and suddenly you think that, you must have done that. It's like toddler level, animal level, like, deductions happening. I don't understand it.
Ro, please, you need to talk more.
Jump in, Ro.
No, I wanted to say, like, going off of what you're saying, that Spider-Man in general has this awesome tragedy of misunderstanding that happens in his media a lot, where it's like, oh, if I only told you this wouldn't have happened, or if this didn't happen to you, you wouldn't be my arch nemesis right now, which can be fun. But like you're saying, if you don't do it well, it's just like, oh, you just did that to get to this. And what I was saying about the lazy writing, I guess I do believe in some cases, but I think most Spider-Man fans enjoyed this game story.
For sure.
There were definitely a lot of things like that were like, oh boy, here we go again with this thing. And I personally hate the end of the world situations that keep happening at the end of these games. I wish it was just not that serious. Even though
made sense for a Sinister Six, like that was fine.
Yeah,
I think it was fine enough.
It's just that we got there so quickly. Like if there was build up to it, and maybe if there was like, I don't know, it just felt so. The world is on fire now.
Well, and I think it was a misstep to do that twice in this game, right? Because they do it at the very beginning with Sandman, and they change the map, and they have fucking sand and fire, and I'm pretty sure it sticks around for a while. Depending, I don't know if it changes depending on what you do in the open world, but like
stays on the ground.
Right. So that was the problem. Is not only did they do it in the first game and in the second, but in the second game you did it twice. So it does kind of lessen the impact. And I can't help but think go back to like
arguably 3 times, because Craven, when he comes, he fucking brings all his gadgets and
right, and then there's like patrols on the streets and all that stuff, and right. And I think there's an opportunity missed, and like again, like lazy sounds so aggressive, harsh, but it's like it sounds harsh, and maybe it's not the right word, but maybe it's complacent or like comfortable. If you take the time to make a superhero story that's intimate, it can really pay off. I think of one of the best things in the Daredevil TV show is literally one of the best scenes in that entire show that's almost undisputed. Is it happens, I think, in the second episode of the first season. It's like it's this huge uncut hallway fight. And that is literally Daredevil going to save one child from human trafficking. And there is such a huge emotional beat at the end of that fight when you get your fun Marvel stuff. You get to watch him beat the fuck out of like countless henchmen, and it ends with him opening a single door off camera, taking his mask and comforting a child. And then he walks out of that building. The building's not on fire, the building's not exploding. He walks out of that building over bodies, carrying one child in his arm. And I can't help but feel like we can try this in video games some way. Maybe that's not the whole game, obviously, right? But like, let's just try it. Let's just try toning down the scale, because it is exhausting to do the whole end of the world thing.
They do that, but they're relegated to side missions that take like 10 minutes to complete. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that might be the issue, is that we're like, AAA development is so focused on like set pieces. And by the way, speaking of set pieces, I think Spider-Man 1, I think kind of blows a lot of these out of the water. This is a controversial take. I kind of miss the what do you call quick time event kind of set pieces from the first game.
I do too.
Are they kind of gimmicky to play? Sure, absolutely. But do they make for like cool stuff that like you can't really do in like actual gameplay? I think so. Like with the crane falling and shooting that onto like the side of the building that leads into the actual helicopter chase, that works because that's there for like a couple seconds. You could do this like grand big scope thing, and then you get to play like the rest of the chase, and like that's a cool setup. That doesn't necessarily happen in this game, other than maybe the roller coaster, maybe.
Yeah, and even then, it's like, well, even to set pieces, the quick time events are one thing, which I think there were, like, I think it's part of that same set piece where the cranes fall. There's a moment where there's a helicopter that passes by, and Peter does this thing where he, like, almost like the launch himself, he flies through the gap of the helicopter feet first in the first game, and I just remember that scene. I'm like, this is fucking rad. What am I watching? But even boss fights, like I can't really remember a whole lot of the environments that I fought bosses in the second game. But I remember fighting Electro in the bank vault and thinking that was fucking awesome. I remember fighting, you know, what I mean, like the Sinister Six, sorry, at the raft. There's a lot of really cool set pieces in the first game that I think were more identifiable or like iconic. I guess maybe is too much of a word, but like this game kind of feels like, as soon as Venom shows up, it's like, okay, everything's dark and goopy, and this is what it is now. Like, this is your life now. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I guess if you brought that up, I'll bring this up as well. I mean, there's some cool stuff in the middle that I like that I guess we can talk about a little bit or mention, like, I'll mention it now. Peter, you know, dying, I think is pretty cool. I think it's a cool way for him to get the symbiote. I think it works. It's unique for this version of Insomniac's storytelling. Good enough. You know, I enjoyed that. Miles fighting Peter, which I think we kind of assumed would happen. I thought I think makes for a really good emotional stake boss fight. Peter fighting Kraven, I think, is extremely lackluster. To be honest, like,
right.
To Gage's point, I think a lot of the fights end up feeling like they're over before you even start. The fight with Scream, I guess, is also that way. It goes a couple rounds, but it's not really changed in between, you know, phases of the boss. It's, you know, she gets health back and you fight in a new setting. It's not really much more to do beyond that. But yeah, I think my biggest thing is what Ro mentioned, the end of the world kind of stakes. The symbiote army was like, okay, that was a bridge too far for me, where I'm like, I'm completely detached from this game. It makes for some cool stuff with Miles and Martin Lee to have to, like, help Peter. Like, when he gets, God help me, I think the anti-Venom suit is the actual, like, disgusting suit from the game. I think the fact that Peter keeps the symbiote inside of him and now it's a good version, I think is extremely corny. And
Even saying that out loud, saying that sentence out loud is ridiculous.
But it's what it is. The symbiote lives inside of him somehow, and now it's the anti-Venom. It's the light side.
It's the good white symbiote, yeah.
Yeah, I think is pretty. It's pretty bad. The Adidas suit, I think, is fine. I think it's getting too much hate. What we should actually be getting pissed off at is the fact that this suit was made because they have a partnership with Adidas. Because Adidas has a real life shoe that they're making that is now, like, in the game. And what do? They tie this into the climax of Miles Morales. It's like, it's born out of, like, this capitalistic greed that I think is absolutely disgusting. And there are already mods on PC to improve it, and they take out the fucking Adidas. They put they take out the hair from Miles, and they put that. I don't really care. Whatever, you know, that's a style choice. I think it's the whole partnership that feels gross to me.
I had to ask Dan last week because, as you guys know, I haven't played it, but I watched my friend play it, and I saw that scene happen, and I was like, wait a second, what? I had to, like, ask Dan, like, was there something that happened between then and him just showing up in a new suit besides him explaining that it's like it's time for a Miles Morales original? He's like, no, nothing happened. So he just showed up like this, just for no reason. It's like, yeah, he just popped up with a new suit. And what pisses me off the most is that he calls it a Miles Morales original, which is what he did in the first game with Genki, which hits so much harder because there was a scene that set it up with him explaining why he's doing this. Like, this is my time. There was a song called "This Is My Time" to go along with the suit. So yeah, that was. It's like Christian's saying, it's like obvious capitalism shit.
Yeah,
and you can put it in the game, like, that's perfectly fine. But to make it a story beat is like, what? Come on.
You know what would have would have made more sense is if in the middle of the game, Peter makes the suit for him or something. Something happens where someone else gives him the suit and he wears it for a while and he's like, this isn't me. I don't feel right. And, like, when he goes to fight Peter, he strips it off and fucking puts on.
Damn, but that's Miles Morales. That's 2020.
I know, but I know.
That's the problem, right? Is that they wanted this to happen again. They wanted this moment to happen again. but they couldn't figure out a way to do
How
it.
to
So
do it, yeah.
do you A, scrap the moment? Do you B, rewrite the moment? Or do you C, just make it happen anyways? And I feel like the problem with this game is that they chose option C for a lot of things.
I will say,
And you're totally right. Like you know what? I paint you one better is that some adoring fan comes up to Miles and is like, "Hey man, I made this for you." Like that's already better than him just leaving and showing up.
Yeah.
That has this game
Like picture or something like,
happens
you
in-
in this really cool
Mhm.
suit.
right, but has this game set up because it sets up in the first game that Peter obviously is a fucking brainiac and he makes his own suits. Does Miles know how to? Because like Miles's suit has like this weird blue glowing liquid, and I'm like, does Miles know how to do this shit? How does he?
I don't know, dude. I don't know.
What is
I think
going on?
Genki-
It's
I
the
don't know if Genki
anti-venom,
is
maybe.
super smart or anything either, but I think I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
But if Genki made it, then shouldn't there be a line of dialogue that
Yeah.
recognize it? Otherwise, Miles is just like, no, fuck, this is mine. I made it. You know what I mean? Like,
I will
Yeah.
say, you guys absolutely destroyed me when I said, "Hey, I like this suit," and you're like, "This is fucking awful." I'm like,
it's
"Oh."
awful. It's
But
so
I-
tacky. I hate
To
it.
be fair, I was talking about the white version because
Alternate.
the original one, I was like, "No, this is gross." But
All
Right.
the alternate versions are easily
Better.
so much better than the
yeah,
just the default one. It's still bad, but
Yeah.
but the other ones are at least tolerable, I think.
and
Right.
also to be fair, I had no idea that it was an Adidas partnership before you guys told me that as well. I had no idea. I didn't notice their logo or anything. So yeah, that is gross, but I had no idea.
Yeah, it's because you were told it was a Miles Morales original.
Yeah,
You were told by
exactly.
Miles, so
By
you would
Miles. I
right.
believed
Why would
him.
Miles lie? This is what you're doing, Insomniac. You're making us think Miles is lying.
We're gonna get into the future and post credits of the Insomniac Games universe, but we have to mention the one part of the third act. Aside from like the Peter versus Venom fight, which I don't know, I kind of find it weird. Venom wings. I was like, I get it. A bit too much for me.
Right.
Harry's sacrifice. We need to mention this because it is what happens. Gage mentioned it, but Harry is being like essentially like, you got to kill me essentially to like get rid of this thing, right? And it kind of happens pretty fast, and it's Gage and I talked about this. I think he mentioned it. They kind of set it up like Peter and Harry have so much history, and it hurts for Peter. I get this, but as a player who has only known them for X amount of hours, the only history that I know that they've shared is that they went to high school together and like played basketball and like that had that locker mission. That's it. Beyond that, there's like not much else that like is really connecting me to Harry. I never really felt that connection to Harry. You can argue that Aunt May has less time in Spider-Man 1, but that's fucking Aunt May. You know what I mean?
I think
But
it is,
go ahead.
I think it is
I
a
wanna go.
tricky balance to figure out some way to, make you care about these characters that you already know, or many people already know. But Gage also has a good point that I'm sure he'll bring up in terms of, having this as a standalone thing. But I do think, yeah, it is tricky. Like, how do you present this story to make you care about Peter and Harry's relationship without treading too much on it and making it feel like something retold again for the 20th time?
Yes. However, go ahead, bro.
No, go ahead.
And yeah, Dan is 100% right because it's so difficult to write something like this. However, to me, it felt emotionally manipulative in a bad way. Of course, when you're writing something that's moving, it is manipulation, but like that's entertainment, that's art. The way it's done in this like sacrificial moment in Spider-Man 1 is like very sweet. It's almost quiet even, and you have like a nice fade to black, and like we sit there with it for a moment. It's very well done. The sacrifice here just feels like, oh, we need like an emotional beat to happen at the end of the game, this game again, and it doesn't hit at all. It feels very artificial the entire way through. That's my criticism with it, is that it doesn't work, and then it leads into him being saved by Miles, which is a good moment, but then it's completely like pulled, I guess, with Norman's response, like, "What did you do, my boy?" Like they literally saved him. They literally saved him.
Right. I don't know how you could infer any other situation based on what you're viewing through your own eyes, Norman. I don't know how.
He's alive and doesn't have the symbiote anymore.
He's cradling your
saved.
son in his arms.
That leads us into the end of the game, and we'll have thoughts here. I'm just going to mention a lot of this stuff. Miles is now the official Spider-Man of New York because Peter is wanting to take a hiatus, an indefinite one. We don't know how long. Wants to be Peter for a while, which is good. MJ starts a podcast, so now we have 3 competing podcasts in New York, and all of them I think are bad. I'm sorry that it's extremely corny. All of the Jonah one's fine. That one's funny enough because it's Jonah. But the Danica cast and the MJ podcast are too corny for me.
Just call us up for Spider-Man 3. We'll do
That's
it.
true.
We could do it. We could do it.
New York, we need to band together. I don't know about this black suit. Danica out.
So Peter quits, which is gonna, with the setup for Spider-Man 3 of possibly Goblin, considering that Norman is in green almost constantly, is going to be a bit weird because like all these interpersonal, villains are coming back. Presumably, Peter's going to have to be pulled back. Peter will return, Avenger style. Post credits, Norman is teaming up with Otto. Norman goes to Otto to ask, "Hey, you know who Spider-Man's identity is?" And they're going to team up somehow. So yeah, Green Goblin will happen, I'm sure, with Otto coming back, which is pretty cool. And then you have, out of left field, Cindy Moon. When this happened, when like, okay, she's dating someone. Oh, and this is my daughter, Cindy. That was a sigh for me. I knew who Cindy Moon is. I know who Silk is. That was such a moment like, do we need a third Spider-Man? Is it cool that Silk is going to be a playable Spider-Man eventually? I think so. I think Silk representation is good. For it to happen this way, it feels like, I don't know. They're already doing too much with a possible, Wolverine is in the universe. We now have a Venom standalone game. We have a Daredevil rumor of a video game, and now we have 3 Spider-Men coming in. It's already a lot. It's balancing 3 Spider-Man with a Green Goblin villain is going to be a little bit difficult for them to write out, in my opinion, based on what I've seen out of Spider-Man 2. That's my worry. That's my worry.
They're gonna do the Sam Raimi. Well, I mean, yeah, like some of our complaints is that it already felt like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 in Spider-Man 2, and that has less characters now than what is being now. To play benefit of the doubt, Cindy Moon could be the standalone half game in between Spider-Man 3 and
a Miles sequel. Yeah.
Right, something like that. It could be that, but it does seem like this is kind of leaning towards Spider-Man 3 Spider-Man. Like that's okay. We get the bit that you're doing now. Yeah. So some of these, the ending there's a lot going on in the ending. I have a problem with Peter Parker giving up his Spider-Man ability to take time off for himself. This is a trend that I'm seeing in movies, especially movies that are about people that are greater than the rest. Like these are people that are physically or supernaturally gifted, and trying to make them relatable to the audience member. I understand why you would want to do that. I understand that you're trying to make it seem like you see a bit of yourself in Spider-Man, like taking time off, like the average person taking time off for your mental health. I support that. But the reason this feels ham-fisted and on the nose is that at the same time that we can all say take time off for yourself, take care of yourself, we can also, in the real world, when we see pictures of people starving or homelessness, and we know that there's billionaires out there that could do something about it, we think to ourselves, it's your responsibility to do something about it. Peter Parker is not an office worker. Peter Parker is somebody who now more than ever, with the whole anti-Venom bullshit, has the capacity to help people. So to make this final emotional beat for this story that he's going to take a little time off to be Peter, I don't know if it's quite the same. I know why you're writing it that way, and I know who it's supposed to relate to, but it's not quite the same thing. The entire city just got turned upside down, and you just solved the problem. I don't know that Peter Parker... I don't see... Again, it's the writing consistency. So he's just going to ignore the police scanners, and he's just going to... I don't know. I don't know. That didn't land for me.
I agree with what you're saying in terms of the story aspect of it. I think it makes no sense whatsoever for Peter's character. However, I think the reason they're doing it is I'm, in my opinion, different than what you're saying. I think that they're doing it because they have to have a reason for Peter to not show up in the Miles Morales sequel, because I guarantee you he's going to play a back seat if he even appears at all in that
Right.
game. And
Right.
and then so
That
then they
sucks.
can, well, yeah, exactly. I agree, but I think that's the reason
Sure.
why they're doing it,
Right.
to build that game up. That game comes out and finishes, and then that leads people to the build up of Spider-Man 3, where Peter returns to fight Doc Ock, etc. And Goblin.
I think that's a good game plan. I've heard that. I think Guy had that same theory as well. I think that's a good game plan. But again, it's like, I understand what you're going for, what the concept is, but the execution
Yeah.
to getting there was weak.
This is the problem I have with current like shared universes in like movies, is like we're thinking too much about the future projects. Just make this one thing good.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
do that first and then worry about that stuff after. We don't have
Right.
to have all this set up right now. Just make sure this one is good.
Yep.
You
And
know?
like, it's like what Rose said earlier about how this game is really hitting for Spider-Man fans, and that's awesome. But like I said to Dan earlier, it's like when you're making a thing, like if it's an adaptation or whatever, it should be able to stand on its own 2 feet, because that is the product. So like
Mhm.
the emotional ties between Harry, it's like, oh, well, you understand that Harry and Peter go way back. Like Harry's a character in the Spider-Man universe. It's like, that's all well and good, and I am somebody who does know that. But the game should be able to maybe not assume that I don't know anything, but to at least within its own confines of the story it's telling, produce that emotional payoff or emotional investment without relying on prior knowledge that somebody may or may not have. And like what Christian's saying is that the problem with all this universes and all these huge tied in things is that they're starting to lean more and more into that, where I'm sure there'll be plot points or maybe emotional beats in Spider-Man Miles Morales 2 or Spider-Man 3 where it'll be like, oh, well, if you know about this character from the comics, then this will really work for you. It's like, good, but also try and write it in a way that I don't need any of that, and that I can stay immersed in this experience and get all of those emotional sort of payoffs.
To an extent, it is a standalone thing, like you're saying, but it's also a sequel at the same time. So I feel like there are
right.
things that you're supposed to know from the first game. Whether they did a good job of fleshing it out in the second game is another topic, but it's not a standalone game.
I was speaking directly to Harry and Peter's relationship. Sorry.
Okay,
Clarify.
so they could
Yeah.
have done that better for sure. And I in my opinion, I think out of the big Spider-Man media, like the movies and like the 3 franchise movies, I think Insomniac has made me care about its characters the best,
Right.
especially the side characters like Mary Jane and Harry. Like in the movies, I don't care about those characters at all, aside from Gwen Stacy and Spider-Man 2 or Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like
Right.
they just don't do a good job of writing the side characters as well as they do Peter or his villains. So I think they already are off to a better start with these
Sure.
games
Yep.
in terms of that stuff. Could they have done better? Absolutely. They could have definitely done better. There was something else I wanted to say. God damn it.
By the way, if you
Lost.
while you remember that, I like
Yeah.
the Mary Jane missions in this one.
I was going to ask that later as well, but that was, God damn it.
I thought it was a good mix of like, you know, you switch to Spider-Man halfway through it, and then like, you give Mary Jane a weapon, and it becomes a bit more interesting. Also, running through the tunnel with Peter chasing after you, and you hear the Venom voice start to come in. That was a good moment.
That was cool.
Throwing that out there.
I did remember what I was going to say now.
Cool.
It was for how Gage viewed how Peter quitting or taking a break rather.
Right.
And I'm for devil's advocate and maybe how I feel. He has taken a break before in the Miles Morales games where he went on vacation with Mary Jane. He just left Miles to do it for himself, and he was even more inexperienced then. So is it right for him to do that? No. Is it in his character? I think it is. He has done it in the past.
That's fair.
He's maybe not as responsible as the other Peter Parkers, but he has done it in the past. And I think the whole thing of him taking a break, he isn't like saying that he won't help Miles. In fact, he said like, if you need me, I'm a call away. Whether Miles will actually call him and feel, or maybe he'll feel like he's a burden and we won't call him. Maybe he actually won't do it. But I think Peter has left it on the table for Miles to ask for help if he needs it. And I think Peter, with all the shit that went down in this game, whether it was written well or not, I think it makes sense for him to take a break because of the stuff with Mary Jane, the symbiote kind of revealing his inner feelings of being Spider-Man, some repressed feelings there that I think he maybe needs to deal with before returning to be hopefully a better Spider-Man. And yeah, that's how I feel about that.
I
Frozen
think
PTO.
I think I concede actually. Yeah. No, I think because yeah, that was the whole arc with the Venom suit, is that it was bringing all these how he really feels about being Spider-Man to the surface, and now everyone in his life knows that, whether or not he wanted them to know that.
Yeah.
So that, you know what,
And the strain on MJ and his relationship as a result of that, because
very true. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
All right, Peter, take some time off. Take some time off. Okay,
Take a sabbatical. Yeah.
I'll approve it. Yeah.
My last note is just pacing. I agree with Gage. I think the beginning is too slow, the ending is too rushed. And with the slow beginning, we get possibly the worst thing this game could do, which is in Miles Morales 2020, there was a mission where Miles Morales listens to Uncle Aaron's beat. And it's been memed numerous times on Twitter about how bad that beat is because it's made by, like, you know, white dudes.
Right.
I guess, you know what I mean? Like, it's not very good, but whatever, you know? It's only there for a couple of seconds and it's gone. It's funny to laugh at. To develop an entire mission where Miles Morales is...
Turn up the beat!
I thought he was a beat maker, but the mission is him DJing a, like, remix of the Spider-Man theme song that goes on way too long.
Oh my
and it's the same pattern on repeat. I did not understand who thought this was fun. Why? Who is this made for? Not for me.
And it's not even
Not for me.
It's not even like it was one of the really well designed mini games where it feels engaging to play. It was just like up on the D-pad, up on the D-pad, up on the D-pad. I was like, come on, get me out of this.
Yeah.
And well, maybe in that case it worked because I felt like I was stuck in this fucking Mysterio Mind Palace and I couldn't get out. Holy shit. That was when I really connected with Miles the most.
Yeah.
Get me the fuck out of here.
Was that the first Mind Palace or whatever the Mysterio?
That was the
thing?
that
It's
was the
when
one
he
that
first
wasn't
goes in,
optional.
yeah.
That was like
Okay.
part of the story. Yeah.
Yikes.
Anyway, platinum the game. 3 to 5 stars for me. 7 out of 10.
Wow.
Love it. No, is that how that works?
3 out of
What?
3 out of
3
5.
out of 5.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
6?
I'd probably give it. Yeah, I guess if you're doubling, yeah, sure. But like on a scale of 10, yeah, because the gameplay is really good. Most of the game is good except for the narrative. I don't think I would consider the game like bad in any regard. Or even
No,
okay.
not at all.
No.
I think it's mostly a good game.
Yeah,
And that's
I think
Go
you're
ahead.
being too low. Personally, I think
7's right about where it should be. Personally,
this game hits for an 8.5 for me. Personally.
8.5.
That is insane.
I mean, the first game was near a 10 for me, so I mean, it's still
I'm sure.
a drop off, you know, for sure.
right.
I want Ro to rate it.
I wish I could. I haven't played it, but if it was just the story, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10 as well.
And that's the
Rose.
thing. The story is just one component, like we were talking about before.
Right.
Like the gameplay for me, I've said this since day one. I think the gameplay is better than the original game, and you know the combat. I really enjoyed what they did to add more layers to that, so to speak.
And like, and to be fair, like there's not only a bias, but there's a context here where it's like I'm somebody who's looking at this. My favorite movies are Manchester by the Sea and No Country for Old Men and XYZ and so on and so forth. So like, if somebody came to me and was like, "Oh, hey Gage, what game should I buy? My 14-year-old has a PS5 Spider-Man 2." You know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's through the lens at which you experience these things. In which case, yeah, I'm looking for more. I'm just looking for more nuance and all this stuff. And again, I like, as much as I am harsh, I would like to point out again, not comparing this against my own whims and all this stuff, comparing it to Spider-Man 2018. I was expecting more nuance. I was expecting more emotion, or more emotion that hit for me, I should say. But yeah, the game as a whole is like totally worth the price of admission. I would say, especially if you're somebody who's a Spider-Man fan like Rashan is, and like many people are, and you know all these things, and you have this extra. it's your investment paying off. If you're invested in this franchise, if you're invested in these characters as a whole, then this is definitely an experience that, like Guy is a huge Spider-Man fan. Like this is hitting for those people, and I am so happy for you that you got to get this kind of experience. But I'm kind of in the same boat with Christian. I would say this is a 7 out of 10. I think for me, which, as we have said many times this before, this is a good game score. That means this game is good.
Hold on.
Hold on.
What were
3
our
out
predictions?
of 5 times 2.
Didn't we predict that?
We
What are you
predict
talking
what?
about?
Didn't we do predictions for Spider-Man 2's review? Did we already talk about that in the past?
Yeah, no, we haven't talked about it yet.
Oh.
You're talking about like Metacritic and stuff. That's
Yeah.
gonna happen at the end of the year. Yeah.
Got it.
Averaging our 4 reviews gives Spider-Man 2 a 7.6 out of 10 from PXN.
That's the PXN score.
Not bad.
Good, very good. A little bit too low for Dan. I can see it in his face.
Well,
He
I
fucking
mean,
hates
to be
us.
fair, Roe only is judging based on story. So maybe that would increase his score.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have a feeling. I have a feeling
sure.
this would probably end up around an 8 average
an 8.
from all
Yeah, we
four
can
of us.
round up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, safely we can round up to an 8. Sure.
Yeah, I don't think
That
the
is an-
gameplay would make me would lower my score.
Well, no,
Yeah.
definitely not. Definitely not.
Definitely not. Definitely not. That is it for the spoiler cast of Spider-Man 2. Tune in next week when we are, I think, maybe doing Game Awards predictions for the show. I think. Is that next week? I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what Dan has up his sleeve for us. All right. Thank you again to everyone joining us live on YouTube and Twitch, as well as podcast services everywhere, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your pods. Thank you, Roshan. Thank you, me. Thank you, Gage. That's Daniel. And this has been Podcast PXN, and we are out.
Much love and keep on gaming.
Much love and keep on Genki.
Keep on gaming.